us in the last couple of minutes. We are waiting for quorum, which means we're waiting for at least one more CEC member to arrive before we begin our meeting. So sorry for the delay, and please just bear with us for a couple more minutes. I know some people are running late, so they should be here any minute. Thank you. Am I unmuted? Okay. Should I speak to your computer or to my computer?
It's looking at you one way or the other.
All right. Hi, everybody. We have quorum, so we are getting started. Somebody needs to mute themselves. I heard myself.
Does everybody have their volume all the way down on their devices? Possible that
Oh, it's that one. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good evening, and thank you for coming to the CEC 15 September. Did I print out the wrong one? No. Okay. September 12th, 2023 business meeting. I am Nancy Randall, president, and I would like to call this meeting to order at 6:42 p.m. Again, if you're just joining us, apologies for the delay in getting started. We were waiting for quorum, which means 7 members of our council to be present. We are coming to you via Zoom, and we have 21 people on the call. We also have members in attendance in person. Before we call the roll, I would like to invite the interpreters to introduce themselves in their languages, and I would like to begin with the Mandarin interpreter, please.
Hello. I'm Sophia Say. I'm the Mandarin interpreter. 我是 Sophia. 我是国语翻译.
I don't have headphones, so I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Hello, good evening. This is Mandarin interpreter Ziyu Parker. 各位家长，欢迎你们参加今天晚上的会议。本次会议有中文普通话翻译。如果需要中文普通话翻译的家长们，请您拨打电话347-966-4114，然后再输入会议密码381-633-537井号键，再播报一遍。如果有需要中文普通话翻译的家长们，请您拨打电话347-966-4114，然后输入会议密码381-633-537井号键。Mandarin interpreter is done with the translation conference line. You may proceed. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And now can we have the Spanish interpreters please introduce themselves?
Sure, I will now introduce the Spanish line. Para español, marquen su teléfono el 347-966-4114 e introduzca el código de acceso 168-212-68, símbolo de numeral. También encontrará esta información en la ventanilla del chat. Recuerde silenciar su micrófono y bajar el volumen del idioma menos preferencial. Nuevamente, 347-966-4114 e introduzca el código de acceso 168-212-68, símbolo de numeral. Gracias. Very well.
Thank you so much. And now can I please have the Bangla interpreters introduce themselves?
I am the Bengali interpreter. আপনারা যদি এই অনুষ্ঠান বাংলায় শুনতে চান আপনারা ডায়াল করতে পারেন 347-966-4114 নাম্বারটা আবার বলি 347-966-4114 তারপরে আপনি একটা আইডি নাম্বার দিবেন ওটা হলো 974-109-225 ধন্যবাদ. Thank you. The Bengali interpretation is over.
All right, thank you so much. Now I will turn it over to Nancy Cruz, our secretary, to call the roll.
Councilmember Nancy Randall,
Present.
Councilmember Antonia Ferraro,
Yes.
Councilmember Vanessa Gonzalez Huerta, Councilmember Nancy Cruz present, Councilmember Donaldo Tony, Councilmember Leslie King, present, Councilmember Hannah Arieta,
Present.
Councilmember Lauren Barkin, Councilmember Dantley Vidal, Councilmember Mamoon Rashid is excused absence, Councilmember Jonathan Davis, excused absence, Councilmember Yoon Lee, excused absence.
All right, thank you so much. And now I'll turn it over to our parliamentarian, Leslie King, to give the public comment protocol. Taking this in person. Business meetings do not include public comment periods. Members of the public with questions are invited to write us at cec15@schools.nyc.gov. CEC members, however, will be given various comment periods. Members will be called upon, are each permitted 1 2-minute comment question. If members do not have comments, they may cede their time to the chair. Thank you. So, we voted on the bylaws for the July 25th annual calendar and business meeting minutes.
Okay. Regarding the July 25th, 2023 annual calendar business meeting minutes, I'd like to open the floor to members for comments, questions, or suggested changes. Should I proceed? If there are none, I would like to raise the motion to adopt. Would anyone like to motion to adopt the minutes? So Vanessa will motion to adopt the minutes. And anyone second? All right, Antonia seconds, and anyone opposed? Since none are opposed, therefore the minutes can be accepted without a roll call vote.
Thank you so much. All right, now we'll move on to a discussion of the bylaws, which, do we have a copy?
There's a copy here.
But there's no copy for each person. Was that? I think so. Is there? There's 2 copies. I think so. anybody can pull it up on your computer, do so.
It's in the drive.
It's in the drive. Great. Can you pass this to Hans? Does anybody not? Okay, great. Okay. Shanice has put it. So everybody that has a device, it should be in front of you. And then Hans, you have a hard copy.
Shanice put it where?
Shanice, it's on the Zoom. Thank you so much, Shanice. So I guess the first question is, has everyone had a chance to read through the bylaws at some level of reading through? Yes? Yes. Does anybody have any things that have come up, that questions, concerns, ideas that you want to bring up about the bylaws? Changes, disagreements. I will bring up one thing that I've been thinking a lot about. And Antonia and I have been discussing this, is in our bylaws on Shanice, could you scroll to, I think it's maybe the bottom of the page. One more page.
Which page?
No, oh, notice, there we go. So right there. So if you look on the screen on page 7, near the top, it says all meetings shall be held in facilities accessible to the disabled. One of the things that we need to find out is if this was something that a previous CEC 15 council placed into the bylaws, or if this is actually the recommendation from BASE, from the Family and Community Engagement Office of the DOE. Now that we are remote, right? Now that we have remote accessibility, it may mean that holding meetings in the buildings that have been converted into accessible buildings is not the only necessity. And the reason I bring this up is because we have been going back to the same buildings over and over again. Unfortunately, the DOE has not converted all of the buildings, not even most of the buildings, not even half of the buildings. So it means that we keep going back to the same buildings over and over again. Just yesterday, Antonia and I had a meeting with the principal of one of our schools, which is in Borough Park, and it's a school that we would love to, it has a huge immigrant population, if not, I think she said predominantly immigrant population. And it would be wonderful for us to be able to get to the schools that have predominantly immigrant populations. There are some schools that right now have a lot of migrant families that are just learning how the DOE works and how education in New York, public education in New York, what is public education in New York City, right? I feel like it would be great if we can come to them during our calendar meetings. Unfortunately, these are also the schools that don't have full accessibility. And so then the question really feels like, are we, by having a remote structure for our meeting, are we providing accessibility in so doing, in having a remote structure for the meeting? And I really, I certainly do not want to create a situation where like this is we do a disservice to anyone who does need accessibility. So I pose this question as, you know, it really feels like one of the many things about New York City public education that we are not being given, you know, the abundance of, every school has been converted over the last 20 years, and now here we are, and it's no issue. Instead, here we are left with these kinds of questions that feel frustrating for us to have to address. So if anybody would like to weigh in, I would appreciate it.
I do not recall in the last year, or more than a year that I've been doing this at CEC, that we have had a person with accessibility needs having to come to the schools. I might be wrong, and we'll have to check on that. But would it be possible to, I don't recall how far in advance we need to plan, and I know it's pretty far in advance that we need to plan the locations for each meeting and where they're gonna take place. There's a request for an accommodation in advance and put it on notice that we will request a school that allows for accessibility if we have far enough notice or something like that.
Which I guess then goes just like it's an argument in the opposite direction, which is that we're putting the onus on somebody with accessibility issues to know well in advance if you're going to be able to make it, as opposed to somebody like everybody else. It's just like, oh, I'm out, time to go, right? So it's not fair for us to plan this. So then it really feels like
I would hate to not give that option too, right? Like I hear what you're saying, and I am completely on board on accommodating the needs of a great majority of the population. In our visits to the schools and meeting the principals has been really enlightening and important, and it really touching, what we are working on. It's helping us connect with the issues of the school and the community. So I do agree with that. What I would like to do is just to still keep a pathway open for at least notification of like, this is still an option if necessary, if you are interested. That's all I have.
I wonder if I think it's a great idea, because I think that just hearing more voices and connecting with the community is so important. And I wonder, since I agree with Nancy, I think that if we're changing where we are, we're allowing people who may not normally be able to come to a meeting, like they are having an accessibility issue as well, that it may not be possible for them to travel to, if we have a meeting here, that may not be, but if it's in their community, that is something that they can do. They can leave for an hour and come to a meeting, or for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever. And I think that if we're talking about like accessibility and access and equity, it's an equity issue also. I think that and if we have the Zoom, we're providing a way for everyone to be able to participate. Then we get into an issue, does everybody have a computer, do they have access? Like there's a whole host of, we could really go down like a rabbit hole, but I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, because I do think that if we're only having our meetings in certain areas, that we are in a way excluding a large number of voices.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Plus, I was wondering if there was some way to get like some middle ground here by saying we will select buildings with maybe, making sure a certain number of them are indeed accessible. And then we will mark, this is an accessible building when we have it, like perhaps, because I do think there's an equity issue if you're not kind of traveling to these areas with families. Often don't have childcare there, or it's very hard for them to get away for a very long period of time, or whatever the reasons are. For the sake of equity, it would be good to be able to go to more schools, and then just make sure that we're selecting some that are accessible, and then indicating that in the list of schools.
This building will be accessible for meeting, blah, blah, blah. Or I just have a question, I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize. I know that, or I think there are some buildings that are not categorized as accessible, and yet it's so we haven't been able to go to them. And okay, just making sure. So for everyone, it's just, they're not categorized, but they are accessible.
They might, so this is the issue that
There's levels.
right, so it might be, for example, it might be that the auditorium is accessible, but then there won't be an accessible bathroom. So then, then you're really, that's unfair, right? So it's a bit, I feel like my head spins a little bit because it really feels like we have groups of people that we really need to make it possible for them to attend our meetings, and we're not able to make it, or I haven't figured out yet how to make it possible for them to be at the same building at the same time.
One idea, just thinking about, is if we had like a certain percentage that was the like accessible, like gold standard, right? There are that have that. And also if we contacted other schools where we wanted to be, I agree with everyone about trying to be more across the district. Every principal will know what they do when they have a parent who has accessibility issues, like how they're going to be assisting that parent or community member to come in the building. So I think if we were really clear about like accessible, like what the accessibility parameters were, if we said like half of our meetings are at ADA approved buildings, and the other half we're just very clear about what the actual limitations of the building are, and offering Zoom obviously too, but
I think that we have the moral responsibility and the legal responsibility to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Opens Meeting Law of New York State. And that means that we have to hold our meetings always in completely accessible buildings. And our role as a council is to, if we don't have a wheelchair lift in place to make school accessible, that we take action to make the building accessible so that we can have the meeting there. It isn't okay that we persist in having only a few schools that are fully accessible for people, because it has lots of ripple effects that aren't just about our meetings or public meetings in general. Like those schools always get cited for summer school, and those principals get burned out year after year. And if we look at our attrition data for principals, we notice that they leave or retire earlier because they are fried, because they're working 12 months a year every single year, because they can't ever take off summer because summer school is always cited at their school. And anytime there's a big community event or a mayoral town hall, or like they put in hours and weeks and months of extra work per year because they have accessible buildings. And every building in the city has to be to some minimum degree of ADA accessible. It hasn't been a priority for the city. It's something that our council could really stand for. And then just the last thing is that offering a Zoom option for people to participate was an accommodation during COVID for open meetings law, but I really worry that the separate is inherently unequal idea of like, yes, you have a physical disability, you may not be able to join us in person, but you can come on Zoom, is, being in a physical space with other people and being on an internet site is not the same. Like the quality of participation is not the same, the opportunity for dialogue, the physical felt like presence of it. So for me, I agree, we need to have a meeting at 1:31. I would so love that very, very much. Or somewhere, closer to there. It's just that I think that legally, I don't know that we are permitted to. Thank you.
I think that you're spot on, and I think that that's where, it kind of just keeps going back to, okay, so yes, and I absolutely agree that the next thing on our agenda is our vision and our goals for the year, and I love that you're bringing up that this is one thing that could be one of our goals for the year. Of course, that's not going to happen right now. Our buildings aren't going to become accessible right now. And in the meantime, we have a huge migrant population as well as immigrant populations that have not had the priority, right, for a long time, or the ability even to be a priority for a lot of the in the center of the decision making, right? So then I guess the next question becomes then, what can we do, right, to address our migrant communities in our immigrant communities, so that we are finding ways to be present? Should we have, nobody's gonna like this, should we hold a second calendar meeting a month? Should we change our business meetings? Our business meetings, I don't know how, if I think our calendar meeting, can our business meetings be anywhere?
You're only obligated to have one meeting a month, but all of our meetings have to be public meetings.
So can
So
our,
it's a bit of a catch-22, because if all of our business meetings have to be public meetings, they have to comply with open meetings law and the Americans for Disabilities Act. So you might be in a bind.
I see, if we had, even if we
One
can
way or
have
the
18,
other.
we can have 18 million meetings.
You
we
can have
still-
18 million meetings, but they still have to be public meetings.
And they can be
nature of-
PS24, because that's the accessible
Well,
one.
fortunately, we have developed a relationship with Win. And
Oh,
we-
that's great.
And we're going to have a meeting in November at one of the Win shelters. They have a fabulous public space that is fully accessible bathrooms. So that is a win, because we've never been able to have a meeting at 124 because it's one of the least accessible buildings in our portfolio. But yeah, there's many others that we can never go to.
So are all buildings that are accessible marked as accessible?
On the DOE
Because-
website, yeah.
Because I thought 839 was not listed as an accessible
But when in
building.
fact it is.
It has, yeah, it's a
become
wheelchair,
accessible.
it has a D75, what kids can be on wheelchairs, it's
Brand new.
second floor.
And it's
Yeah.
not
It's
listed?
completely, it was either 839 or it was 321, one of those two, and I know 321 was made accessible.
321 is accessible, yeah.
So one of those schools I remember was not on the list, and I was like, well, that's weird, because I know those schools personally have access. So that's my question, is that list up to date?
There's accessibility, there's accessibility data on on the DOE website, so it'll say not accessible, but then if you click on that, sometimes there's some more detail about exactly what the accessibility features are for each school. So it maybe you have to.
So maybe playing with that definition a little bit might be somewhere where we can get wiggle room,
Well, I mean,
because there is access in schools that aren't listed, sorry.
Well, it's like, do we throw out, do we say, well, we just can't offer you an accessible bathroom, but we can get you up a ramp
Hey,
into the
like,
theater,
that's not
I don't,
okay.
it's
No,
not.
they have to have
It has
bathrooms,
be
but
100%
these are
fully
accessible with,
Oh, you're saying it's fully
wheelchair-
100%.
so anyway, I'll
It might-
recheck the list, but I know that when we were talking the last time, I was like, why are these schools not on the list? And that was weird to me.
I think that's a really good question. We could ask the facilities, folks in a working business, because part of it is the accuracy of the data and who updates that spreadsheet, because that matters for so many reasons. Student placement, lots of different ones, right? Yeah, that's important.
Maybe we need an accessibility spreadsheet, we need to call these schools one by one and have a conversation.
Or make it part of the liaison walkthrough or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hans or Tammy, do you have any comments?
Would those meetings include like sign language interpreters and?
The DO has never provided that. It's a good point, though.
Yes, it is,
Mhm.
it is.
Because we're not in compliance with the Americans for Disabilities Act if we're not providing that.
Yes, it's just, we need an ad hoc committee, actually, this is what I think we need to do, we need to form an ad hoc committee to figure out how it is that we are going to be able to make these changes, long-term and short-term. So how we are going to, in the short-term, reach across our district, and in the long-term, how we're going to really advocate, push for, get people together to say, okay, this all needs to happen and it needs to happen quickly.
And another question is, when you send out these emails to find out if the parents are coming, with, you should send out like 2 emails, 3 emails, just to make sure, guarantee that they're gonna be there and, it's not like a waste.
What do you mean?
Just a
Emails to make sure
confirmation.
parents are coming?
Yeah, confirmation for the disabled parents or the.
Oh, okay.
You wanna guarantee, you wanna confirm that they're 100% attendance, that they're gonna be there.
In order to be able to provide whatever it is that we need to provide.
Yes.
Yeah. Funds, do you have any? Comments?
I'm okay. I'm just listening. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's just.
I'm with you on the committee. And, we had the last meeting, we had the diversity, equity, inclusion director. It's possible we could, frame this under inclusion in some ways, right? And there's also, the district is also getting about a little over, or has received a little over $2 million in the budget deadline is 2024 for the integration grant, which is in components like about inclusion and difference and, restructuring and allocating funds to places where we could be more aligned with serving our whole community. So that's also a source of money that we could look and say like, hey, how's that, like, what's that looking like? How are we spending that?
Yeah.
Or, or what's the priority there?
I would just add, we've looked at the elevator costs in the past.
Okay.
They're way more than $2 million.
Right. I know.
It laughs at $2 million.
Right, I'm sure.
And also, it's like, I remember there was a contract approved not that long ago where it was like changing like 2 toilets in a bathroom was gonna be $300,000 or something like that. I mean, it was something crazy, and then that goes to the contractor. If I may, that goes to the contracts and who's signing the contracts and who's rubber stamping the contracts and how this is all being done. So, that's all a lot of issues that really needs to be addressed. But, okay, does anybody have any additional comments about the bylaws? Anything? Yes.
So we're in a new council and a new term, and usually the new council has to update the bylaws. If this council is happy with the bylaws, we don't have to create an ad hoc committee to revise them. We, in the last term, revised and voted on these minutes because we had to update them according to the changes to the law regarding the new quorum and, but, if the council wishes to create an ad hoc committee to revisit these bylaws, maybe it's not, maybe it's not something anybody wants to do in this moment, but it is something that the council can do at any time.
Yeah, I think it would be, we're all nodding. I think that we should. I think it's a good use of our time to figure out, to address this accessibility issue. Like to form a committee to look at these.
Would you like to hit that?
Sure. Sure.
Wonderful. Great. Wonderful. Great. Okay. All right, this is very exciting.
And then that, last one.
Oh, yes. Okay. I was just got a list of accessible buildings.
Alright, so the committee would be Leslie and of course our president.
Do we need to motion to start this committee?
No,
or-
no.
Okay.
No, the
We can
president
also,
can appoint.
we can also have non-CC members on committees. If anyone in the room is interested in joining this committee, please, feel free to do so. But, and it is possible to have non-CC, I can't plug in. I'll just.
Can you
I
pull
will
it over?
reach.
That's what we did last
I'm
time.
gonna be off this year. Nancy? Yeah.
A question, I don't mean to break protocol, this is my first meeting, do we have an opportunity to ask questions about the being presented, or is that for later?
Technically you don't,
Yeah.
but we can choose.
You're the president.
We can choose to do so. So
If
please, go
someone were
ahead.
to ask a question, one might ask whether these bylaws we're talking about are publicly accessible.
Yes,
They are.
they're on the
Okay.
website.
So Leslie, I would love it if potentially anybody, that you do know from 321 were, you could, the meetings have to be open to the public.
Yep.
We can hold meetings, but we can hold them via Zoom. Can we hold ad hoc meetings via Zoom? Oh, actually, I don't even know.
Many meetings have to be public meetings.
So must we follow open meetings law?
Each committee shall operate under open bylaws.
They have to comply with open meetings.
Operated under open meetings law, yeah.
You know, they can happen in that office. So you don't need like, to get a permit, they can, unless you're after hours or something.
So it just means that anybody can show up, but we don't need to.
Zoom in.
Does that have to be Zoom?
You don't have to zoom it, no.
Can it be on Zoom?
It could, but you have to meet in person in a space and you have to notify the public, you have to send out.
Can Leslie be in person?
Leslie will always be in person.
And everybody else shows up.
No,
in
my
Zoom.
point is just I want other people to be able to attend these meetings, and so obviously
Do I have to come, do I need to come here?
Or you could do a rotation all around, you could
You
do
could meet in a public library.
Any publicly accessible place where other people
Public
can.
library, that's a beautiful public library right over there in Brooklyn Heights, it's amazing, but you have to ask them. You have to get this,
Right.
you have to secure the space.
Right.
It's much easier to just
Yeah.
have
Meet
it
in
in
an
the
office
office.
here.
Okay.
All right, so this is exciting.
I'm very excited.
Shanice would have to send out a notice to the public saying the committee on bylaws is meeting at X day at X time.
You could meet at 321, they are now listed as fully accessible.
I thought that they.
No,
They are,
that's awesome.
Yeah, we've
That's
had,
great.
Yeah.
we've had
Yes.
committee
Yeah.
meetings in the
Awesome.
basement of PS 32. We had them
Yeah.
all of them.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will offline make this happen.
Okay.
And get it going. Okay, see you soon. Okay, so with that, let's move on to a discussion of our vision, mission, and goals.
Do you want me to dig it up and share it on my screen?
Sure. And also, this is really just like throw out some ideas that you're passionate about. We don't have to formulate a plan tonight based on anything, but this is really getting us to a point where in the next couple of weeks, we're really gonna be able to create a plan for us for this year. What are we gonna focus on? And I think we just came up with one thing, right? Out of the problem came a resolve, right? To advocate for one specific thing. So other ideas, other things that are meaningful to people.
Oh, yeah. So I shared the, oh, you don't have your stuff, so, there we go.
Okay, great. So from our website, and we shared it in our website, our mission is that CEC 15 believes that every child is entitled to a high quality education, a safe and open school environment, and equal educational opportunity. The mission of CEC 15 is to promote and support the educational needs of public elementary and middle school students. Does anybody have any ideas of burning changes that you want to make?
Do we also have a high school?
What?
Don't we also have a high school?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, if nobody has any comments on the mission or vision, CEC 15 is dedicated to a meaningful, innovative, and inclusive way of educating children that allows students to thrive in every aspect of their enriching academic, social, and emotional growth. Our collaborative, successful, and high-achieving schools embrace diversity in every form and encourage each of our students to explore their interests, finding and nurturing their many hidden talents. In partnership with families and school leaders and educators, partnership with families, our school leaders and educators, help our children and young adults find their voice, build self-confidence, and develop their ability to become independent leaders and productive, caring people responsible for shaping a global society. We believe that every child has an innate capacity for love learning, its responsibility, and the potential for greatness. We are committed to supporting that greatness and invite all members of our school community to partner with us in making this vision a reality. If you do, if anything comes to you, and you want to talk about this offline, do so. But in terms of our goals for this year, I would love to, let's go around, and I'd love for you person to just separate what are some things related to social.
So I guess. Yeah.
Oh, the mic wasn't supposed
Oh,
to.
it wasn't AC.
Okay, well, now we're moving on. Okay, so I guess one of the things that I'm certainly interested in is ensuring that the District 15 equity plan stays in place and that we are doing whatever we can for the sake of equity, and that's very general. I know that I think that there's some motions in the opposite direction, and I want to make sure that we are, staying on it and keeping an eye on that. I have a bunch of nits, but I don't think they're gonna go into that. I'm gonna pass to you.
Okay. Oh man, it's education when we start.
Yeah.
But I think that one thing I would like to continue to push for is the librarians issue. I think it's important that we have certified librarians at every school in the district, and that we have libraries to begin with. Some of them are just completely on the premises. The other main issue as a result of the migration change that we've seen is ensuring that we are actually able to provide for the needs of new incoming students throughout the year, and those changes need to be educational, language, emotional, you know, all the package, and that extends to families. And the last one that I've seen as a sticking point for me lately has been the deprioritization in elementary schools or in middle schools of science, languages, and arts. It's just a nice plus if a school has it. It's not a given, and I think this should be at the core of education.
Well, I think I hope I'm on the same page, but I would like to promote more partnership opportunities with the schools, you know, with different people from the community, like gardens, connecting more to the people, more art, more music, more dance, more culture in schools for the kids, so they can make education a little bit more fun, interesting.
So you mean community partnerships, like with community
Community park,
organizations?
gardens, you know. Like be in touch with more people for the community, like you know, have a beautiful garden, and keep in touch with the old people for the community, the very interesting people, you know. More art, more music, more art, like more field trips for the kids. Like something like Brooklyn School had a great program with BAX, a great dancer, Jose, I don't know, you know about him. They teach all the parents dance with the kids, it's incredible, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so they have this amazing interaction. You can do good cardio too.
Okay, great. Stanley?
Promote faith inclusion, faith for special education kids, more exercise, better lunch. One of the dilemmas that most parents are having is with the busing. I'd like to see how can that be improved.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that a lot of mine echo what's already been said. It's definitely upholding the District 15 equity plan and prioritization, elevating inclusion in all of our schools, so among students and families. And I think, you know, including the neurodiverse population, multilingual students, students with disabilities, and our LGBTQ community as well. And especially right now, supporting newcomers and the family engagement that comes with supporting newcomers in the millions of ways that needs to happen in our schools.
I'm on the exact same page with everyone. I think that Lauren said my first two really beautifully, so thank you. And in fact, you included 2 areas of difference that I hadn't put on my paper. But really, wherever like I see a little thread of the equity and diversity plan unraveling, like being like, that's unraveling, stop that, because that leads back to something bigger and more concerning. Yeah. And also the inclusion piece, and making sure that it's programmatic and not just incidental. I also really have a lot of concerns about academic autonomy, and the level of brilliance that's in our district in terms of teachers and principals is so extraordinary. I mean, these people are so extraordinarily talented, and I worry about the standardization that they're facing right now, and how much and how little sort of room they have to make their own decisions about lots of things: curriculum, programming of the day. The focus is sort of articulated from outside the school when we have very seasoned leaders who know what their school communities need most, and that worries me. And I think that, like, as a council, I really hope that we're able to be really strong allies for people who are, you know, doing that work every day in really brilliant ways, and just like, you know, encourage them and also figure out ways to like give them the space to do their work as well as they do. And that really connects with what Vanessa said about deprioritizing the science and language arts and like including programming, just making sure that, you know, educators who are working with kids want to enrich kids as much as possible. People who are outside make contracts with big textbook companies that take all day, and computer companies that like have kids online constantly, like collecting data about them. Just backing up our educators for me is a really big deal. And then like the last thing that's on my list that I haven't heard yet is just, I really think this council has the opportunity to exercise a lot of leadership in our city. And we can spot trends and say like, hey, stop that. We can hold power accountable because we are all very invested close to schools. We care. We have a very collaborative group of schools, leaders, invested parents. I mean, every district in the city has all of these assets too. I just think that we are in a really great, positive, unique place to be able to grow our work and also say to the larger system, like the 15% budget cuts you're anticipating, why is that exactly? Like where is that? And why did schools only get $3,000 or less to welcome 50 new students? That doesn't make any sense. Like what's the deal, you know? And so that's kind of, and I'm just being really plain spoken because I don't know how else to say these like very impassioned things that I feel, which is that like our schools need so much support and what is coming at them doesn't feel supportive. So that is, and our like most recent arrival, our migrant students, they need so much, their families need so much, and they have a lot to offer us too. So how can we structure our schools so that we make it a reciprocal partnership and not like us helping people, you know? It's just so yucky to think of it in ways that it's a deficit model. Yeah, that's all. Leslie, go.
Oh my gosh, that's that's hard to follow. I want to echo all of you. D15, the diversity plan is pretty high on my list, and I think from there, if we're following the D15, this is my opinion, that I feel like if we are really following the D15, then a lot of these issues will fall under there because it's equity issues, it's inclusion issues, it's like addressing diversity in the schools. And so I think if we really just go back to that and really hold steady to that, there were so many people that worked on that plan and really tried to look at so many different issues. And I know that there can be, you know, there's learning to still and change that still should happen. But if we keep going back to that, I believe that that we can support all of these issues. That's
Rotate. Okay, I have like a long list here. Okay, the first thing, with regards to supporting our migrant and newcomers, I think there's room to build relationships with our federal elected leaders because we often speak to our city electeds and our state electeds, and we haven't really built much of a relationship with Dan Goldman. I think he's the one who covers most of our district at this point, and our federal officials really have not said anything to our president about supporting our states and our cities as they try to welcome newcomers with funds. So I think there's room to build a relationship with him so that he can become a vocal proponent in DC for us. One of my big goals personally is the legislative breakfast. So we got to get moving on organizing that, which will be in January. And that might be a way to, you know, build a closer relationship with Senator Goldman. And after school, universal after school is something I have periodically convened a group of PTA presidents and after school folks about and tried to push through in various, not push through, but we tried to advocate for. And I know that our borough president feels very strongly about after school. And so one of my goals is to try and strategize around greater advocacy on after school programs. Let me look at my notes. School-wide enrichment, that's always that we're gonna have our yearly event on that. Oh, space. We have a lot of space in our building, in our district, that there's gonna be decisions that are made about, and ensuring that our space is used appropriately and equitably and used for our district and not used for educational purposes that are not contained within our district or aren't part of our district superintendency. Or at least not part of our New York City Public School umbrella. And I think I'll stop there. I have more, but I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I am ceding my time to our guests.
Oh,
So,
look at that.
yeah. So if you, because of the mic, you'll have to come sit.
Okay, got
Maybe you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Jessica Patrick. I'm a parent at 261. I have a student in second grade.
Hi, my name is Ken Eby. I'm a parent at PS 261, and we have 2 students in second grade. Would you like to? Okay. I think a lot of what was said around this table just resonates tremendously with me. A couple of things that come to mind are leveraging this council to put pressure on our elected officials to really implement some of these laws, such as the class size law, like really put pressure to make sure that a law isn't just passed with no plan to implement in a reasonable amount of time, just to sustain that pressure so that they know that parents and families are watching. So I think this could be a really powerful vehicle for that. And second, I think in the context of the news that we heard over the weekend about budget cuts and services being cut to city government agencies, to make sure and make certain that New York City public schools are not falling victim due to lack of advocacy and lack of standing up. So just making sure that we are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that the resources coming to the school, for example, that support set number of classrooms in each grade, are not rolled back to the extent that we are in a position where we're not able to make that progress. We're really not able to recoup the losses. So even in times of fiscal austerity, making sure that we're not the first to go and the first to suffer from these cuts.
All for everything that Ken said. It's just as the budgets get cut and we're about to lose the COVID funding, it looks really dire. It feels like there's a lot of families in the neighborhood and in the district who are flight risks, and so that will just lead to an adverse effect where enrollment continues to go down. Where in our grade at school, we're at 32, 31 kids in a class, which seems like the opposite of what we're supposed to be moving toward, and that just happened like a week before school started. So, it's taking us, we all saw the writing on the wall. We know that the budgets have been cut, but it's about to get a lot worse. And what do we do to prevent that? And how do we partner with y'all to really be better advocates and make sure our voices are heard and pushed back.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're happy to be here.
Very happy to be here.
Keep coming to our meetings.
Yeah.
And tell your friends.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're trying. I think a few of them are online, so,
Yeah,
you
a lot
know,
of
I
them
think
are
we're
online.
ready to mobilize. And sorry if it took us a bit long to get here.
That's really shocking about the 31 and 32 kids in your children's classes.
Yeah.
That's completely not a ratio for second grade at all. It's not even, that's not even.
Right. It was like listening to y'all talk about your mission and talking about like making sure our kids have a love of learning. It's really hard to do, and your kids are in like a class of 32. Like, how do they get to participate? How, you know, we're trying to get student, you know, interns in to help get extra adult bodies in the room, but that's just not feasible. And it's also, how is it that if enrollment is down, like, is our staffing in line with the enrollment? Like, I don't know, it's how do we make sure the right people are in the building and that we're not putting money towards salaries of extra people when it's not an actual teacher that needs to be in the room.
And it's there one teacher in the class, or there's like two teachers, or two teachers and one teacher?
We have 3 classes right now. In 2 of the classrooms, in the general ed classrooms, I believe there is 1 lead teacher, and I think there's a para in each of the rooms, a D75 para. This is the first time that that's happened. You know, it wasn't like that in our first grade classes. And then we have 1 ICT class that has multiple adults.
So unfortunately, what happens when you have enrollment drops is you have to consolidate your classrooms, and your class size often gets bigger.
Yeah.
Because you have to get rid of a teacher, so if you have like, 15 kids in one class and, 17 kids in the other, you're like, well, I can't really justify having 2 teachers, so now we have a class of 32.
But yeah, with gifted and talented programs, they will sit half empty.
Mhm.
If enrollment is down, they do not.
They don't consolidate.
No.
They actually get
They-
additional funding for having under-enrolled classes. It's called breakage.
Breakage?
It's called breakage. They have to give a teacher a break. And so you need another person to support that teacher. Am I correct, Enrollment? That you need to support that teacher while they go on break.
Well, the breakage is about the number at which the district or the city sets the line. At what point do we break into 2 classes, or what point do we consolidate? That's where the word break comes from.
That's where.
Yeah, and usually it floats because it's, we have mayoral control here, so there's a lot of different floating expectations. But on this particular issue, it's weird to me that it's second grade that's so overcrowded, because the entire initiative of early literacy is that kids will be fluent in reading by the end of second grade.
Right.
So if you have classes that are 32, how does that conflict with the larger system's goal that we heard today? That initiative would remain fully funded, so kind of like it's at cross purposes with itself.
Mhm.
That's kind of weird. And then this group also, I mean, I was just like writing on my paper, like, what were your children doing for kindergarten? Were they at school every day? Or were they going to school 2 or 3 times a week because of COVID? Like, what was the deal?
I think our kindergarten class was the first class back after COVID. So we are suffering from the fact that, there are a lot of people left.
Right.
So our enrollment was already small, but you get used to the smaller class sizes. And now it seems like this 32 kids in a class is just going to follow our kids through the rest of elementary school. And that doesn't seem acceptable or sustainable for learning.
And the goal with the curriculum, if I remember correctly, was personalized attention to the students, getting to know them. This is how we're going to succeed and get every kid to read. I just remember him saying that, the tension. I was like, how are you going to do that with big class sizes? That can't be done.
And isn't it, I understand, if it's the smaller class sizes and mid grades, and as they get older, they have a larger class sizes.
Is there anything additional that you guys would like to bring up or share or?
Nothing on my end. I just want to thank you all for your service and look forward to working with you going forward. And thank you, Nancy, for
Yes,
giving
thank
us
you.
the opportunity as well.
So just as a summary, we have, and I'll just throw out things that were said: D15 diversity plan, librarians, migration, prioritization of science, languages, arts, partnership opportunities with community organizations, inclusion for special education kids, more exercise, better lunch, busing, D15 diversity plan, inclusion among students and families, supporting newcomers, diversity plan, inclusion, programmatic, not just incidental, academic autonomy, having the ability to make their own decisions for school leaders, leadership in our city, hold CEC 15 leadership in our city, hold power accountable, migrant communities, diversity plan, federal funding for migrants, legislative breakfast, universal after school, SEM, space, what can be done with our space, class size. I didn't take notes. So, budget cuts, mayoral control. So this is a lot, right? A lot of things that that are issues with our public education system, and it's so frustrating. But that's okay. That's what we're here. We're going to fix it all this year. And so we're going to. I would say the best thing for us to do is we have a meeting next week. We have a calendar meeting next week. So I would say the best thing for us to do is in this week, between today and next week, we really figure out what are the things that we can do, right? What can we focus on? What of these things, what are most pressing? What can we focus on? What can we say, okay, these are the things that we absolutely cannot look away from? Obviously, the budget cuts, it's a crazy situation that it's like every few months, all of a sudden he's like, let's cut more funding from schools. And it's like, wait, what? How, what? In November, he wants the first proposed cuts to be presented in November, right? So this is wonderful because now we know we have a deadline between now and November to really push our elected officials, our city council people, to say this is totally unacceptable and we don't want any cuts.
Here's a question. Is the fact that the DOE is paying the rent for charter schools, is that something that we could, I don't know, I think a lot of people don't know this. I just learned it, that we can leverage to try to get money, like to normalize it so that New York City is like the rest of New York, and to get that money put into our schools, because I am watching ads on TV by charter schools, television ads, a lot of them.
Absolutely.
And the taxpayers are paying for that.
Yes, this is absolutely something that we should be fighting to change. Right now it's the law, and so we're in a situation where there's charter funding. So I'm gonna say, I would say funding is something that's come up. D15 diversity plan, it's something that's come up. The fact that we have a large population of migrant students in our district, that we can directly be influential in terms of how it is that our district is accommodating our students on a larger scale, right? This is something that has been made into, I'm going to say too many things, so I won't. So we can certainly, in terms of our district, and certainly in terms of our ideas for the city, we can certainly present those. So those are some of the bigger issues that I think that are very much busing. Of course, there's an imminent strike. So there's a lot of issues, right, that are really kind of large and looming right now. So these might be the things that we want to focus on, while at the same time, we should divide and conquer. I urge you all to become even more involved in this job that we have, that we aren't getting paid for, which is, again, you look at cities that have school boards where it's a full-time job and people are getting paid. There's lots of issues that come up with that. On the other hand, people are investing, everybody on the council is able to invest 100% of their working time for the benefit of the improvement of education in that district, right? So it's like there's just lots of issues. With that said, please give more time.
Do you want to brainstorm in some other working meeting, potentially now that we've had this conversation, we can look at the minutes and, figure out what set of committees we may want to create and like who wants to lead each, and then we can start, sort of mobilize in that direction so that we each have, people working on toward a thing.
Exactly, yeah. I think that at our October business meeting, that would be a great time to be able to everybody focus, right, on what it is that they're going to spend, their time on.
Do you think that gives us enough time, if we do it in October, that gives us enough time to sort of prepare for the November budget cut announcement?
The other option, and maybe this is the easier option, is I would just assign it and based off of people getting back to me, and we do this offline, because otherwise, as we saw with the liaison assignments, we had a lot of it takes time, right? Yeah. So maybe we'll do it that way.
And everyone can just write to their city council members and say, we don't support these budget cuts.
Yeah.
Right, how does that, didn't we get extra money now from the state?
We got,
That was
the
designated
foundation aid was
towards
fully
the small
funded,
class.
but I get the impression that Adams is not steering that money
He's gonna
at our school.
lose money somewhere. And-
Right.
Yeah. I see it. This sounds like it.
Okay, we're doing okay on time, but we're gonna move on to the discussion on CEC 15 consultation on PC hiring. And I'll let you guys know, so far, and Antonia and I have met with a few different principals over the last few weeks as they have been looking to hire parent coordinators. One of the changes that was implemented last year is that CECs would be involved in the hiring of parent coordinators. So far, the principals that we've met with have been in a situation where obviously they need a parent coordinator. They've gone through the process of interviewing several people. They've come to us with their top candidate, and they've been enthusiastic about their top candidate. And I feel like I'm not going to stand in their way of having a parent coordinator at their school for their families, which is what they need. And so it's been wonderful to be able to meet these parent coordinator candidates. It's been wonderful to meet the principals that I don't know. I trust these principals. I trust our principals to be doing the best for their families. So with that said, moving forward, if any principals have need to hire a parent coordinator, when they reach out to our council, it would be ideal if the people who are doing the interview of the parent coordinator candidate is the liaison of that school, and either myself or Antonia can also be present. I know some councils are doing things differently. They're doing like a whole council type of thing, or they're doing a committee on the council. I really find that we want parent coordinators in our schools. And I think that we want to do what's going to be most expeditious. And I also think that, I feel like we are able to not hold things up by trying to convene several people. So those are my thoughts on the issue. I believe that the liaison, and either myself or Antonia, is sufficient for representing our council and for representing the families of our district, to make sure that the parent coordinator that's being onboarded is going to be somebody that will be in the best interests of the families of our district. So that's what I would like to do. Yes.
Sorry, guys, this is the closest door, assistant principal. That helps go with CEC feedback.
No.
That includes some PTA feedback, or SLT feedback. Now, there was a change to the law last year that gave CEC this extra, it's not even a power, but it just says that we have to consult, that's the word, we have to consult on the hiring of the parent coordinator. It's very vague. What does consultation mean? And so everybody is sort of interpreting that in their own way. And I agree with Nancy that we just want these principals to be able to hire the person they want. We don't want to become a roadblock because we know how long it takes to hire somebody in DOE. God, and the vetting process goes on forever. So, we don't want to make it too onerous, especially when it's not, there's no language dictating process other than consulting. So anybody here on the council is welcome to consult on those Zoom calls.
So if any principals reach out to you as their liaison, please, and say, we're looking to hire a parent coordinator, please email me. And then together we can set up a meeting with them. If any principals reach out to me, I will reach out to whomever the liaison is moving forward in order to set up a meeting. Okay, with that, let us move to our resolutions, and I will turn to Donalda for the resolution to support students with personal information compromised in the June 2023 data breach. Shanice, can you pull it up as well? Thank you.
I think I can get this. I'm gonna pull it up.
Oh, and
she's gonna put it on. Do you want to do that, or do you want to plug it in?
Yeah,
Sure.
Do you? Oh, and you have a copy in your folder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm just reading
It's
this.
live.
Oh.
The microphone's live.
Hey, everybody.
Everyone can hear you.
Nice to see you all.
You can just introduce it and say, if you want to give a little introduction of it, and then go on and read it.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. I would like to thank members of the council, specifically Antonia, Nancy, and some other outside folks who served as content matter experts to help draft this resolution. I think that we're all really concerned in the modern age about personal identifying information and children and educational data. And it really surprised me that we have an opt-out possibility for state tests, once a year, and we have an opt-out opportunity as parents for photos and videos, but there's no kind of way to say, hey, I would not like a software company to collect data about my child's social emotional well-being, daily math or English language arts reading practice. We all learned that the College Board recently sold data to TikTok about kids' SAT scores and AP test performance, and it's just really shocking the way that software companies monetize data and the way that our students and staff data is safeguarded by the department is really concerning. And so this is a long resolution. I apologize for that, and I will do my very best to read it with verve. Okay, so resolution to support students with personal information compromised in the June 2023 data breach. The community and citywide education councils, CCECs, are composed of parents who have been elected or appointed to serve as stakeholders of New York City school community districts and specific cohorts of students representing New York City public school students and their families. And then there's where we begin the whereas portion. Whereas the New York City Department of Education is mandated by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, and the Individuals with Disabilities Act, amongst other legislation, to ensure the security and privacy of student and employee records. Whereas in 2020, the New York State Department of Education adopted Part 121 of the Regulations of the Commissioner of Education, Section 2D of the Education Law, which outlines numerous requirements that all school districts must implement to strengthen data privacy and security and protect personally identifiable information. Whereas the New York City Department of Education is required by New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D, to inform all parties affected by the unauthorized release of personally identifiable information within 60 days of discovery of the respective breach. Whereas school districts in New York consistently demonstrate difficulty with fulfilling their duties to secure the personal identity information of students and staff, as noted in an audit of the privacy and security of student data carried out by New York State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli in May 2023. Whereas a breach of the file transfer system of the New York State Department of Education contracted vendor, Move It, took place beginning Memorial Day weekend, May 27th to 28th. Whereas the New York City Department of Education announced to members of the media on June 23rd, 2023, that the personal data records of 45,000 students and an unspecified number of staff members were compromised. Whereas over 19,000 documents were accessed without authorization during the Move It data breach, including full names of students, employees, and contracted related service providers, dates of birth, social security numbers, approximately 9,700 were accessed, residential addresses, telephone numbers, students' online information, student information system or OSIS numbers, employee identification numbers, information regarding parents, guardians, siblings, and next of kin, documentation of disability and special education service provision, Medicaid reports, documentation of home and heritage language, and student evaluations and progress reports. Whereas the documentation available to hackers during the Move It data breach is reported to include documents related to third-party related services received by students with individual education programs, IEPs. And whereas a prior data breach in February 2023 of the Personnel Eligibility Tracking System, or PETS, affected approximately 80,000 current or former employees of the DOE's contracted occupational therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, and other related service providers who are employed by the DOE partner agencies. Whereas the affected current or former employees of the DOE's related service provider partner agencies were not notified of the PETS breach until July 2023, 5 months after its discovery. Whereas a prior data breach of Illuminate education servers took place from December 28, 2021 to January 8, 2022, the personal data of 800,000 current and former students were exposed across 700 DOE schools. Whereas all NYC DOE contracted vendors are required by Section 2D of the Education Law of the State of New York to use encryption technology to protect data while in motion or in its custody from an unauthorized disclosure using technology or methodology specified by the Secretary of the United States Department of Health and Human Services and guidance issued under Section 13402H2 of Public Law 111-5. Whereas the NYC DOE's contracted vendor, Illuminate Education, admitted that the databases where the students' information was stored were not encrypted at the time of the data breach. Whereas the NYC DOE's contracted vendor, Illuminate Education, informed the DOE of the 800,000 student record data breach on March 25th, more than 60 days after the breach was discovered on January the 8th, 2022. Whereas the Illuminate Education data impacting 800,000 students across 700 DOE schools is reported by the NYC DOE to include first and last name, OSIS numbers, school of attendance, date of birth, gender, grade level, race or ethnicity, home language, course information, academic testing information for some students, English language learner status for some students, documentation of disability and special education service provision, and whether or not the student is economically disadvantaged. Whereas the NYC DOE's response to the Illuminate Education data breach entailed two parts. First, requiring schools to stop using Illuminate by June 30th, 2022. Second, reviewing the security measures being taken by other vendors that provide similar services to the DOE's schools, families, and students. Whereas the NYC DOE's response to Illuminate Education data breach lacked urgency, as demonstrated by the DOE's direction to schools to stop
students from using Illuminate software more than 6 months after the original data breach, and more than 3 full months after the DOE was informed that the vendor's servers were not encrypted. Whereas the NYC DOE's response to both the Illuminate data breach and the PEPS data breach did not lead to the enactment of sufficient proactive protections for students and employees' personal data. Whereas parents of students affected by the Move It data breach were sent notifications on August 7th, 2023, 68 days after they learned on May 31st that children's personal data was exposed. Whereas New York City Department of Education employees and third-party special education service providers affected by Move It the data breach were sent notifications on August 15th, 80 days after employees and contracted professionals' personal data was exposed. Whereas there is still no parent bill of rights or contractual addendum from Move It or the company that owns the program, Progress Software, to attest to the privacy and security protections for student data on the DOE website, as New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D requires. Whereas it is also the case for many other companies and organizations that the DOE has provided access to sensitive personal student information contrary to the law. Whereas some of the companies for which the PBORs are the parent bill of rights are missing have been shown to use personal student data for commercial and marketing purposes in violation of New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D, including Navient, the College Board, contracted for the administration of PSAT, AP, and SAT exams. Whereas many of the parent bill of rights that are posted are incomplete and insufficient, and that they do not minimize the data collected, do not specify when the data will be deleted, do not require rigorous encryption, and or do not clearly prohibit the commercialization of the data as required by law. Whereas the U.S. Federal Trade Commission data reveals that New Yorkers have reported 22,517 identity fraud cases thus far in the 2023 calendar year, we are currently in September, with total losses of $88.6 million to New Yorkers in 2022. Whereas the New York City Department of Education has a moral and legal duty to exert its full capacity to ensure the security and privacy of children's and employees' personal information, education records, human resource data, and other identifying documents. Whereas educational technology and software vendors collect a trove of personal information, including student learning data, emotional status, health, disciplinary and disability information, family, economic, and racial status, and student assessment data. Whereas the NYC DOE has failed to ensure that the personal student data that companies and organizations can access is minimized, and that the data is deleted when it is no longer needed by companies and organizations, even when this is specified in their contracts and their parent bill of rights, including for students who have long graduated. Whereas students' personal data and performance assessment is monetized by some of these companies for a variety of purposes in violation with New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D, whereas these companies did not adhere to New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D in terms of encryption for Illuminate Education, storage, Illuminate Education, and Move It, and transfer Move It of the children's personal identifying information. Whereas a recent audit of the state comptroller found that 80% of cybersecurity incident or breach reports from the NYC DOE lacked enough detail for the comptroller to say if officials informed students and teachers that their data was breached within a legally required 60-day timeline. And in more than half of these breaches, the city failed to make the legal deadline to notify the state of a problem. Whereas the Special Commissioner of Investigation for Schools has repeatedly recommended improved security and privacy protections by the DOE of student data. Whereas the NYC DOE has announced that it will expand online learning despite expanded risks to student data privacy that this involves. Therefore, be it resolved that the Community Education Council of District 15 urges the NYC DOE to comply with the implementation of information security protocols and technologies that meet or exceed industry standards for data security as specified in New York State Law Part 121, Section 2D. Be it also resolved that the Community Education Council District 15 urges the NYC DOE to fully implement the May 2023 recommendations, that's a typo, sorry guys, of New York State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli in compliance with New York State policy, and to ensure the privacy and security of students' and employees' data. Be it also resolved that the CEC of District 15 urges the NYC DOE to fully comply with Education Law 2D and ensure that every company and organization has access to personal student data, has an enforceable contract with the Parent Bill of Rights that is posted on the DOE website, and that this Parent Bill of Rights requires data minimization, high levels of encryption at all times, and a date certain by which the data will be deleted as soon as possible, at the very least when the student leaves the district or graduates. Be it also resolved by the CEC of District 15 urges the DOE to require their vendors to delete all personal student data at the end of the school year whenever possible. Be it also resolved that the CEC of District 15 urges the DOE to ensure that every contract and parent bill of rights shall clearly prohibit the use of any such data for sale or any commercial or marketing purposes. Be it also resolved that the NYC DOE shall maintain rigorous oversight so that all organizations and companies with access to personal data adhere to their contracts and agreements, including requiring regular, independent privacy security audits. Be it also resolved that CEC District 15 urges the DOE to fully comply with the breach of notification provisions of the law, including timely notifications of the state and all affected families. Be it resolved that CEC 15 urges the NYC Comptroller to act according to his authority to refuse to certify any DOE contract with an organization or company if that contract does not fully comply with New York State Law, Part 121, Section 2B, including all the provisions outlined above. We also resolve that the CEC of District 15 urges the NYC Comptroller to audit the DOE agreements with vendors already certified to see that they fully comply with the law and to see that they are posted on the DOE website. And therefore be it resolved that the CEC of District 15 urges the New York State Comptroller to propose what changes are needed in law or policy to ensure that personal student data is better secured and protected from breaches or abuse. I have to give an apology to the interpreters. I know that was way too fast. And I think the remedy is probably for us to have this translated so that the community can see it. And we can figure out how to do that, I'm sure. But I apologize for you all trying to keep up because that was impossible to translate. But a hard copy can be forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Leslie, I'll turn it over to you to go down the roll for member comments. And we're not voting on this resolution tonight. We're just commenting on it. So do you have the roll?
Oh.
I'm going to open it up for comments from our council members. I will start with Nancy Randall.
Thank you. Zanelda, thank you for all your work on this resolution. I think these data breaches are absolutely insane. It's shocking, the fact that it happened and then it happened again. And it really makes me not trust the Department of Education with the personal information of my family. And it makes me very worried about the fact that they have so much of our personal information at their fingertips.
Thank you. Antonia?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for putting all of the time. I know this took a lot of time, and it's no small effort was put into this. So thank you so much for writing it. Would it be interesting to you to have Lainey Hameson come at our next meeting and present on this issue, because this is like, you know, something she's been working on for a long time, and she might be able to give a little presentation about it, and then we can have a vote. So
yes, I want to say that this was absolutely a team effort of many contributors in this document, and you were one of them. Thanks for being my CEC mentor. It would be so wonderful if she could come. I was not aware that she had an advocacy life before her Class Size Matters work. I think that this is just, I wasn't expecting myself to get excited about this issue, but when I saw that it's happened 3 times in a calendar year, and also when I just think about the level of monetization that's possible, I also become irate when like kids are put on computers all the time that like tracks their data and forces them to be online, like on iReady for 30 minutes a day. To me, it's not appropriate. Our teachers have so much more to offer than that software program can give kids. But the idea that data is collected and then can be presented elsewhere to sell more iReady services in more districts, and that the kids' data we never follow up to figure out if it's deleted. It follows our children around for their lives, and it can set their life course, you know, depending on where the marketing that's targeted to them, everything about it is concerning. And so I appreciate the council's support and put in, you know, encouragement, and also it would be great if she could come.
Yeah.
Thank you. And any other passionate person who's, you know, worried about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Vanessa Gonzalez.
Just thank you. I know that, you know, you put a lot of effort into this, and the research is solid, and I appreciate having all the information all consolidated into one place. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Nancy Cruz.
This is awesome. I have to say that as a PTA person for many years, I cannot send a parent an email, a fellow parent an email, without like first getting their permission. So the fact that like these corporations are getting access to this information and doing all the things that they're doing, because in this country, we have not caught up to the technology, and we are not protecting our kids. And this is really just, I was just going to mention that I know Andrew Gurnades is someone who is working a lot on kids and data protection of kids. That's kind of one of his top agenda items, so he might be someone to talk to. I called him and spoke with him about it as well. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you. This is great. I think we should shove this over to media as well. It's so comprehensive, like give it to media.
Thank you, Nancy. Me, Leslie King. I just want to thank you for doing all of this work. This is incredible. And I don't really have anything to add. I just want to thank you for doing this. I had no idea this was happening. And you are next, but since you just shared, I'm going to go to the next person, if that's okay. Hans Ariada.
Thank you very much. This is very, very impressive, really interesting, because I mean, we can see like how they marketing all these little kids, you know, and it's not just gonna be affect the lives today, also in the future for a lot of things like they cannot be do, just like, you know, like keeping records. That's the like abuse of information, especially minors, you know, like, and nothing, you know, it's like, I mean, I don't know if they have a fact that's real, because sometimes just somebody can sit down and write it down whatever they want. You know, because personally, I have that kind of experience. Like, I have a kind of background where things came out, like, where it come from, all these things, you know? So, like, things happened 20, 25 years ago. So, this thing is going to affect these kids for the future, too. That's really, really bad. Even to, excuse me, I'm not supposed to say this thing, I don't know, but even for legal status, to try to apply for some kind of legal status in the future, they're going to affect all the kind of things, because all these things are going to appear right there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hans. Lauren Barkin.
I just want to say thank you. I don't think I'm unturned. I share, no, in a good way. I share everyone's fear and hesitation about all of this, and found myself having this thought as you were reading with gusto. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Of like, the longer this remains an open working document, that like likely we can list more things that go into it. So the fact that that's where my brain was going is a real signal of how big the problem it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dan Lee.
I want to say thank you. I 100% support you, and it's just not the data records, it's also dental information. I remember, yeah, my son, the school came to the school had some dentists come to my son's school, and I received a letter in the mail stating that the information that was collected about his dental records, whoever had it in their possession, they lost it on the train. So it's just not computerized information, it's other things. And I 100% support you.
Yes, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So again, we're not voting on this resolution.
Today, next week, we will be voting on the resolution. There will be a public comment period on the resolution next week. We will also potentially have Lainey Hameson come and also present her work related to this. So please hold tight with your votes. Thank you so much, Donalda, for your work on this. Okay, and now we will pass it to Antonia for the resolution to uphold 2022 high school admissions rules.
Vanessa, how has the sound been? Because we got a comment from the interpreters at one point that they weren't able to hear us. Has it been okay?
Was that during the reading?
Yes, it was during the reading.
There was a brief moment, but I
There was,
think it was
okay,
fine.
all right, I don't know why that would have happened, but out of our control. Okay, so I was asked to write this resolution in August, and District 16 in Bed-Stuy has already passed the resolution. Various parents in District 15 came to me. And so what the resolution does is it says, look, we've had a lot of changes to our high school admissions policy throughout COVID. Let's uphold those changes. Let's not make any more for the time being. Let's study and evaluate their impact and better support our families in that admissions process, and then consider changes in the future that are more designed for equity. So I will begin reading. CEC 15 resolution to uphold the 2020-22 high school admissions rules for this fall's enrollment period, 2024, and conduct an impact analysis. Whereas the New York City Department of Education, NYC-DOE, enacted a series of admissions changes for entry to New York City public high schools between 2020 and 2022. Whereas in 2020, use of selection criteria such as state tests, punctuality, district priority, and attendance were prohibited. Whereas selection criteria used by the majority of screened high school programs was standardized to ensure transparency on the rubric used to sort student applicants. Whereas the most recent changes were announced by Chancellor David C. Banks on September 29th, 2022 for the enrollment period commencing in fall of 2023. Whereas a centralized ranking process utilizing the same selection criteria emerged to admit students applying to screened New York City public high schools that do not have their own school-based assessment. Whereas according to the press release, schools will admit the top performing applicants from across each middle school and citywide. Applicants to screened high schools will be in groups based on their final 7th grade core course grades. Students will be admitted to screened programs in group order, starting with students in group 1. If all students in group 1 have been accommodated, students in group 2 will then be considered for available seats, and so on. Students will be in group 1 if the average of their final 7th grade core course grades falls in the highest 15% of their school or citywide, and that average is at least 90. Students will be in group 2 if they are not in group 1 and the average falls in the highest 30% of their school or citywide, and that average is at least an 80. Students will be in group 3 if they are not in groups 1 or 2 and the average falls in the highest 50% of their school or citywide, and that average is at least a 70.
Students will be in group 4 if they are not in groups 1, 2, or 3, and their average falls in the highest 70% of their school or citywide, and that average is at least 65. All other students will be in group 5. Whereas an applicant must have average core course grades of at least 94.33% to meet the citywide threshold for group 1, 90.25% for group 2, 83.5% for group 3, and 76.75% for group 4. Whereas also the press release announced additional changes, including earlier application timelines, earlier offers. The DOE would begin middle and high school application timelines earlier in the fall on October 12th for high schools and October 26th for middle schools, so that offers could be released in March for high schools and in April for middle schools. Additionally, the NYC DOE would release high school offers together with any specialized high school results in one offer letter. Central open house calendar. The NYC DOE would launch an events calendar in my school so that families could find all admissions events and school open houses and tour information in one place. Clearer admissions information. The NYC DOE would share the number of waitlist offers a program has made in the past so that families can better assess their chances of receiving an offer through the waitlist process. Improved virtual audition experience. The virtual audition and additional material submission experience would include clear instructions and submission confirmation. School day SHSAT administration. The NYC DOE would continue to enable 8th graders in public schools to take the SHSAT during the school day at their current school rather than traveling to sites on the weekend. Wait lists extended. The NYC DOE would extend middle and high school wait lists to mid-September in order to fill any seats that became available after the start of the school year fairly and transparently. Whereas this admissions process resulted in 75% of students receiving an offer to one of their top 3 choices, and 95% of students receiving an offer at one of the 12 schools selected on their application. Whereas compared to the prior year enrollment period 2022, fewer students received an auto match to a school to which they did not apply. Approximately 5,800 students received an auto match, meaning they were matched to a school they did not apply to, compared to approximately 6,700 last year, being 2022. Among the 5,800, approximately 2,000 were non-applicants, meaning those who did not submit an application, and approximately 460 were private school students, meaning only approximately 3,360 public school applicants are receiving an auto match. On average, these students tended to list fewer application choices. Approximately 60% of them listed 6 or fewer choices. Whereas admissions changes since 2022 produced modest increases in the number of low-income students receiving offers to screened high schools. Whereas according to the UCLA Civil Rights Project's NYC School Segregation Report Card, New York State still holds the distinction of being the most segregated state for Black students and the second most segregated students for Latino students. This outcome is driven by New York City, as it is the largest school district in the state and nation, educating approximately 40% of New York State children. Whereas since 2010, attendance in segregated schools has intensified for Black students, while white and Asian attendance in these schools has been relatively stable and much lower than that of Black and Latino students. Whereas Black and Latino students disproportionately attend schools that have more than 75% rate of poverty, Latino students increasingly attend these schools, their share up from 66% in 2014 to 73% in 2018, and Black students from 66% in 2014 to 71% in 2018. Whereas no other city has as many screened schools and programs as New York City public schools. Whereas during the pandemic, New York City's public school enrollment declined, driven by families leaving New York City. Rural and suburban areas saw population gains. Low-density localities tend to have school systems that admit resident students without screening. Families left for a variety of reasons, affordability of New York City seemingly a significant reason. Contrary to claims made by some families, there is no evidence that removing barriers to middle and high school admissions is a cause for families leaving New York City. The logic is particularly questionable given that many families move to places that do not screen students for admission to public schools. Whereas a closer look at the data show that districts serving some of New York City's most vulnerable families posted steeper enrollment declines than wealthier districts. These students belong to the same groups, proved to be disproportionately excluded by screened admissions, such as Black students and students from low-income households. Whereas when given the choice in fall of 2022, many middle school superintendents rejected a return to selective screening as it would hinder enrollment. Only 59 of 196 middle schools reinstated their screens. Whereas families wishing to remain in or return to New York City may be discouraged by any new admissions changes designed to intensify the complexity of the process and the exclusivity of screened schools in the New York City public school system. Whereas New York City public high schools are schools of choice. Whereas New York State Education Law Section 2851 mandates that other schools of choice, known as charter schools, enroll through a lottery with enrollment targets for students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch comparable to those of the community school district in which the school is located. Therefore, be it resolved that Chancellor David C. Banks and the New York City DOE uphold the admissions rules announced on September 29th, 2022 for this year's enrollment period commencing in fall of 2024 and conduct an impact analysis. Be it resolved that the New York City DOE partners with an independent organization to conduct an analysis of the effects of high school admissions changes made since 2020. Be it resolved that such analysis include a survey of all current middle and high school students citywide in order to collect feedback on high school admissions before any new changes to the rules are considered or enacted. Be it resolved that the New York City DOE better support under-resourced students and families to navigate the high school application process in accordance with the recommendations of New York Appleseed by investing in high school guidance
through community-based organizations, after-school programs, school counselors, and making the high school admissions information available in print for those who lack digital access. And be it further resolved that any future changes are designed to improve the number of underserved, underrepresented, and under-resourced students admitted to screened schools.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will open up to the council for any comments. Nancy Randall.
Thank you, Antonia. You put a lot of work into this. There is extensive, I guess you can see it if you're looking online. There's many footnotes. So thank you so much for putting all this work into this. This is an important resolution. Again, we're not voting on this tonight. This is an important resolution, and I'm very grateful for all the work that you've put into this.
Thank you. Antonia, do you have anything you'd like to say? Vanessa?
I think this is gonna be good. I would love to see the results of study because we would see the results of kids that started and ended high school education through this program. So I think that's gonna be really valuable information. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Cruz.
Thank you so much, Antonia. This is comprehensive and yes, with extensive footnoting, I see. Really awesome. I hope folks at this meeting will take the time to read through it and browse the footnotes as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Donalda Chumley.
Antonia, thank you for putting this together for us. I know that this is a very sensitive and people have deeply held beliefs about this particular issue. And my personal wonderings are how many District 15 eighth graders we have graduating, like in each cohort, and how many of them are matched and unmatched. Because my personal belief is that a child in our district from pre-K all the way to their graduation needs to have a viable close by school to attend, especially in light of the transportation challenges we have going on in terms of safety in our city right now. And so how can we build or support the building of a continuum of great schooling that parents can feel really confident in middle school that my child's going to go to a great high school, and making sure that there are enough seats for District 15 students in District 15 high schools and surrounding districts is crucial, I think, to that. And so I will deeply consider this and talk offline about, like, how can we make sure, just act locally and citywide in terms of that, just because there's so many, it's like life changing for a kid not to get a viable match. And the parents worry so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now speak. Leslie King, thank you so much for doing this. I think that this is such an important conversation to have. I love all the work that you put in here. I can't wait to go and read all these articles, your footnotes, and I hope that everybody who is in this will do the same. Thank you. Hans Arietta.
Thank you so much. I know you put a lot of work into it, a lot of study. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope we can, break all these barriers and make everything more even for every school. I have these more people come from different headaches to every different school. Yeah. Thank you.
Lauren Barkin.
I also wanted to say thank you. I think that you put in here
all of the information, but also from a number of different perspectives that made it like it felt like a very comprehensive view of the issue. And it also felt like that equity that we were talking about at the beginning of our meeting today was very much at the heart of the whole resolution. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lauren. Danley, Vidal.
Thank you, and I want to say that I'm one of those kids that tested into Ferguson and Brooklyn Tech. I was put on a wait list. I was like probably for one school, number 30, for another school, like 60. I was put on that waiting list, but I never got into that school. So I ended up going to Aviation High School, which was an experience. It was a good school. So thank you. I look forward to seeing what the resolutions.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. It's at this time that I start to get a little worried about time, so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any old business that anybody wants to bring up? I will just use this opportunity to mention that tomorrow night, Shahana Hanif's office is hosting a cannabis conversation for parents. It is from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. via Zoom. So you should join and you can email Shahana Hanif's office to get the Zoom link information. I just wanted to get that out there. There's been lots of emails sent, so hopefully families in the district know about this. Does anybody have any old business? I see, no, okay. Fernando brought up something for new business. We will address it, but does anybody have any new business?
I have a quick announcement.
Okay.
Just a reminder to everybody in the council and people that are watching us at home in Freedom to Dream Day, which is a celebration of the arts in education that is happening outside of 295. It's gonna be hosting its 3rd annual event, and that's going to happen on Saturday the 23rd between 11 and 4 p.m. I'm gonna make sure that you guys have the digital flyer so you can share with your schools and coordinators.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. And then Donato brought up that we could discuss tonight hosting the Chancellor Town Hall. We don't have time to discuss that tonight. I'm sorry, we don't have time. They have proposed, I will just say that they have proposed the date of Tuesday, November 21st for us to host a town hall. We only get to host a town hall with the Chancellor once during our 2-year term. So if we choose to not host it now, then we would be able to choose a future date. If we choose to host it now, this is essentially the only time that we're going to be able to do this. Feel free to send feedback offline. Okay, moving along. We are now going to go into executive session actually first let's have the treasurer's report, and then we'll go into the executive session. So now we'll do your report, and then we will go into executive session.
I can make it very snappy. I believe we're all shared on the Google Doc of our prior budgets, and there is a paper in the folder that is a budget resolution version 1 for the 2023-20 proposed budget, the allocation of funds that we receive, and then how they've been broken out in the past. I met with our incredible administrative assistant, Shanice, about this and just walked through each. Antonia also gave me a really great onboarding. One thing just to flag is that historically the council does not use all its funding every year, and it may be worthwhile to figure out in a committee structure or in some other way
if we know that we typically don't use the money, how would we like to direct the money that we don't use so that we can plan for it, now-ish, so that we do end up allocating all of our available funds so that it just revert back to the system. So that's something for people to consider going forward. There is nothing new around this. Next month, I would imagine that we'll talk about, Shanice and I will talk about how reimbursements work, and I'll have more information for you for that in terms of transportation, childcare, and so forth. That's all I have. Thank you.
That's great. We
Can
are
I
now
just ask-
going into executive session,
Sure.
or rather,
Oh,
is there a motion for us to?
I just had a quick question.
Yes.
Do we know the amount of funds that are generally, or the average, the amounts funds that are generally not used every year?
Yeah. I think we can do some research and find out. And then that would be we could ballpark it.
It's a problem.
You know.
I know, but it's a problem because it always comes down to how many people aren't utilizing their reimbursements, and so it's a ballpark. It's like 3,000, but it's like you have to have that money allocated to member reimbursements because some people might.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And I would encourage everyone to please seek your reimbursements this year. So, we can, I can send out an email with that information, so that the ball can start rolling with that. Thank you. Is there a motion for us to go into executive session?
I want to go to executive session.
Is there a second? The council will now go into executive session. We want to thank everyone who is here in person and who is on our Zoom. We now must, do we ask them to leave, or can we ask them to leave, or must we leave and go into that?
We ask the members of the public to leave,
Okay.
and they can come back after executive session is over.
After this, basically we will adjourn the meeting. We can only be in this building for another 14 minutes.
There is a family room down there on the,
I mean, one
down the
option
hall.
is we just close the door, actually.
Yeah, we could just close the door.
We'll just close the door.
Oh, okay.
Okay, great.
Hardcore fans.
Oh,
so
nice. Door.
Did you note the Who motion? Okay.
I did, I'm not sure, it's the same purple though.
It doesn't matter what the color is. All this is
It'll
just
just
gonna
say-
get cleaned up in the minutes.
It's in the script.
Yeah,
You're
right.
putting everybody in on mute?
Yeah, you gotta mute your mic.
Yes, interpretation
We will be right back. Please don't leave. Okay.
Sure.
All right, thank you all so much for your patience while we went into executive session. We went into executive session to discuss matters of staffing. So thank you so much. We have resolved the questions that we had and that we needed to share with the council. Thank you. I will just share one thing that we did mention about the budget is that we All right, sorry about my computer died. One thing that we are going to need to do, and there's been a lot of back and forth that we have had with the DOE, is we are going to need to revisit the ability to have both remote interpretation and in-person interpretation. So we are going to see how we can do that with our budget. But thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll motion
Is there a
to
second?
adjourn.
Great, so at 9 p.m. we are adjourning this meeting. Thank you all. See you for the calendar meeting on September 19th, next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. at PS 38 in Orem Hill. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Calendar meeting next week.
Interpretation. You're dismissed. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.